Hello and welcome. This is Matthias 76. Together, we are decoding the deception, and we're here today. We're going to finish up chapter 47 of the book of Genesis, and I've labeled this section, Joseph Plunders the Egyptians. Got the thumbnail up here on the screen. It's just an interesting section that we're going to go through here. It's really fascinating what goes on if you stop and think about it. Just want to plant the idea now. Hey, if you're watching this video, especially if you watch regularly, before you do anything else, go down below and hit that like button. If you're new here, but you love Bible study, go down and subscribe. Those things are a big help to the channel, and it'll keep you informed about the content that we put out. We're putting out Bible videos each and every week, at least 2. So let's jump into the text. The New King James Version has this as the heading: Joseph deals with the famine. No, he's going to plunder the Egyptians. This is just harsh, what he's going to do. Now, as much as I'm going to point out how harsh it was and that he is plundering the Egyptians, the people who enslaved him, the people whom later the nation of Israel, 400 some years hence, they're going to plunder the Egyptians. Big picture, setting matters, right? Context matters. How much do we know without doing research and relying on experts, scholars? How much do we know about the worldview of the people who lived in Joseph's day in Egypt or Babylon, which wasn't even a nation as we think of it yet, Samaria, Canaan, wherever you want to go? We have to work to get our minds around the way they viewed things. And if we judge them as though we're pulling them out from thousands of years ago and plopping them down here in the world in which we live and judge them by our standards, well, that's not doing justice to them. It's not doing justice to the text. They thought about things differently. They were part of a world that is as strange to us as, I don't know, being on Mars would be strange to us. Everything was different, other than that they were human beings, did the things that human beings do, and lived and died. Everything else was different, how everything worked, and we need to remember that. But all that being said, Joseph's going to plunder them. Still, in the context of the world in that day, it was pretty normal. And you might even say it was fairly tame. Could have been a lot worse. Now, there was no bread at all in the land, for the famine was very severe, so that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. Now, remember, when he sent his brothers back to bring Dad down, and they sent the carts to bring Jacob down, the part that we just saw the climax of in the last section, the first 12 verses of this chapter. You can go watch that video if you choose. At that time, Joseph had told him, we were only 2 years into this thing. There's still 5 years to go. There's a whole lot of bad coming. And the first 2 years of a famine are the easiest compared to the next 5. That's why he wanted to bring them down. And now they're settled in Goshen, and they have a royal allotment of food because they were made officials of Pharaoh as chief herdsman for him. But it's going to get a lot worse. So when it says Canaan, the land of Canaan languished because of the famine, it means where they were, it was really bad. Where they are, it's really bad. The only thing is, Joseph has warehouses stuffed with food. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan for the grain which they bought, and Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. He took all their money. They got food in return. He took all their money, and he's going to take everything they have. He's going to take everything they have. But he starts out, hey, this is what the food costs. Pay it. That's step one. So when the money failed in the land of Egypt, everyone's broke. And the land of Canaan and all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, "Give us bread, for why should we die in your presence? For the money has failed." They're saying, "Give it to us, please. Give us food, or we're all going to die." Now, there are places in the world today where there is famine, where people are put in these kind of situations. If you're listening to this video, that means you can spend money for one of these things, or you've got a computer. We've never been hungry. Oh, that means I skipped breakfast, right? I'm hungry. No, these people were going to starve, just as people in places in Africa and Asia, other places today, people actually starve to death and their children die first and they have to watch. That's what these people were afraid of. That is the fate that without Joseph awaited them. They said, "Give us bread." They're coming and begging. And what does Joseph do? And then Joseph said, "Give your livestock, and I will give you bread for your livestock if the money is gone." So basically, in our day, I pull up in my car at the government office where they're giving away food. And I say, "I got no money. I got to eat. I need food for my family. Give me food." And they look out and say, "Well, give us that car and we'll give you food for this year." What am I going to say? I'll go home and get the title. Here you go. Take it. Desperation. And now they don't have any livestock. You know how hard it is to farm without livestock? Because part of livestock, it wasn't just the milk you got from the cows or the goats, more likely. It was the donkey or mule or oxen that pulled the plow so that you could farm. He took it. They brought their livestock to Joseph, and he gave them bread in exchange for their horses, the flocks, the cattle and herds, and the donkeys. Now, you notice I got my little note here, right? My nice little notes, and this note has an exclamation point. And that's saying, hey, make sure and tell them this. We read this list. Horses, flocks, cattle, herds, and for the donkeys, and we go, yeah, critters, farms, old MacDonald. They're listed in order of value. They're listed in order of value. Horses were the most valuable, and here's an interesting point. You want a Bible trivia question to stump your friends? When is the first mention of horses in the Bible? You can say, oh, I know where that is. It's Genesis 47:17. And it's easy to remember, right? 47:17. It's the first mention of horses. They'd been around. The historical record, Egypt, other places, shows there had been horses for some time that people possessed, had domesticated, whatever. But this is the first time that horses are mentioned in the Bible, but they're listed first because they're the most valuable. And it just goes down in order. Flocks, that's goats and sheep, cows, cattle and herds, and donkeys, they come last. Thus he fed them with the bread in exchange for all their livestock that year. Another year, now they've got no livestock. They've got nothing, none of that left. So even if they could farm, and how do you farm during a famine? Do you even bother, if you had seed, to go out and plant seed when you go to turn the ground over and it just blows away in the wind because it's so bone dry? And I have to stop here and make this mention. Remember, in the Egyptian cosmology, 2 videos ago, we talked about Jacob packing up his cosmology, his view of the world and its gods with him down to Egypt. Egyptian cosmology, Pharaoh was Ra, their chief god, Ra, incarnate. He was Ra incarnate, and he was in charge of order. They called it Ma'at. You've listened to my series on Exodus. We've got the whole book of Exodus you can go through. Decodingthedeception.com, Bible, Exodus, there you can go listen to all of them. The inundation of the Nile, every year it would flood, and it brought silt and fertile soil and water, and they were able, look on a map, that huge Nile Delta, they were able to farm. Failure of that meant Pharaoh was failing. Joseph saved Pharaoh from that. Why did Pharaoh love Joseph? Why was Pharaoh going to give Joseph pretty much anything he asked? because he saved his bacon. Pharaoh would have been deposed, and they would have found a Pharaoh who Ra really cared about and was willing to dwell within. Worldview, cosmology, the way they looked at things, it really matters. When that year ended, they came to him the next year and said to him, "We will not hide from my lord that our money is gone, and my lord also has our herds and livestock." Stating the obvious, we've got nothing. We had to walk here. We couldn't ride a horse or a donkey. There is nothing left in the sight of my lord but our bodies and our lands. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants to Pharaoh. Give us seed, that we may live and not die, that the land may not be desolate. We've got nothing. What they're saying is we have nothing. We've got land that's not growing anything. There's no rain. There's no flood. What good will it do us to die on our land by starvation? Take us. Take the land. Both we and the land are your servants forever. In perpetuity, Pharaoh owns it all. Think of what has gone on here. And we can talk about the way things were done in the world at the time and what in different lands they would tax people, what percentage of their land, etc. That's all an interesting study. But you can't get around the fact that the one who was brought here to Egypt as a slave, whom God blessed and raised up and exalted, and his family has come, and through them being there, they're going to end up in slavery. Joseph is subjecting the entirety of the Egyptian people into slavery. He's taking everything they have. And make no doubt about it, he could have done something else. He could have just said, "Hey, here's some food. Pharaoh's got it. You're okay. You've paid enough." No, he plundered them. He took it all. He took it all. And we can speculate about that and wonder and think about the motivation all we want, but it's just that. Bottom line, and we can say he was just doing what a good official would do. And that's probably true. And when you compare the subjugation he placed them into, the servanthood, the status in which he placed all the people, they were way better off than people in other ancient kingdoms who had to pay a third or half of what they grew to the king. You can say all those things, but the irony, the juxtaposition of where he came from, where he is, where Israel is going, what's going to happen, we at least need to noodle on it, think about it, scratch our heads a little bit. And I don't have absolute solid answers for you other than that I can tell you, just like the name of this video, Joseph plundered them. He took it all, left nothing to them. They didn't even own themselves, kind of like the way he came into Egypt. Then Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for every man of the Egyptians sold his field because the famine was severe upon them. So the land became Pharaoh's, and as for the people, he moved them into the cities, from one end of the borders of Egypt to the other end. Only the land of the priests did he not buy, for the priests had rations allotted to them by Pharaoh, and they ate their rations which Pharaoh gave them. Therefore, they did not sell their lands. That's a common system. The priests, they were taken care of. In Israel, the priests are going to be taken care of and given an allotment. Now, remember, this just specifies the priests here, but because his brothers were made chief herdsmen last video, they're in a special status. They don't get plundered. Interesting. Then Joseph said to the people, "Indeed, I have bought you and your land this day for Pharaoh. Look, here is seed for you, and you shall sow the land, and it shall come to pass in the harvest that you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh. 4/5 shall be your own as seed for the field and for your food for those of your households and as food for your little ones." So did they stay in the cities forever? No. He brought them into the city so he could feed them. They're going to go back out when the time comes and they can plant and things are going to grow again. But henceforth, basically, he did what was done in 1913. He instituted an income tax. He instituted an income tax. Our income tax was instituted to pay the national debt that was going to accrue because the Federal Reserve had been formed in secret. We didn't have an income tax before that, but he instituted, in the time of panic, in the time of crisis, he instituted an income tax that was going to last forever going forward. And all taxes in our modern day, they tell you this is temporary. We only need to do this for a while to fight this war, whatever else. Once the government starts to tax you, it never goes away. So they said, "You have saved our lives. Let us find favor in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants." Tyranny reigns, and the oppressed are thankful. Now, couldn't help it. The World Economic Forum has a plan for us. There's Klaus Schwab himself right there. They literally say, and every ruler in the world today, going around the globe, they all went to Klaus Schwab's, I call it his Mein Kampf kindergarten of future leaders, the future leader school, even Putin. And that's why what the World Economic Forum says is so important. You want to know where things are heading? Look at what the World Economic Forum is saying. If you want to know what happened and why, look at what they were saying before it happened. It was their idea. And what do they say? They put out a video about this. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy about it. I'm sorry, but I just couldn't help but think of that when we see this in our world that's so fascinated with Egypt. You know where most of the treasures of Egypt are? They're in the archives of the Vatican and they won't give them back. That one's a weird one. But anyway, they say, "You saved our lives and the lives of our kids. Let us find favor in your sight, and we will be Pharaoh's servants. We own nothing and we're happy. Thank you, gracious master." Exactly what's going on here. And Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt to this day. That means the time that Moses wrote this, wherever you want to put that, 1400 BC, that Pharaoh should have 1/5 except for the land of the priests only, which did not become Pharaoh's. Patterns in history. We see them again and again. So Israel, we'll wrap this up here fairly quickly. So Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions there and grew and multiplied exceedingly. Don't miss that this is in contradistinction to everything else that everybody in Egypt is suffering. The way this is phrased, it's done intentionally. Meanwhile, we would say, meanwhile in the land of Goshen with Egypt, in Egypt, for the Israelis, cucumber. We would say, I need to say that more clearly, cucumber. We would say, meanwhile, in the land of Goshen for the Israelites, everything was just going swimmingly. All was good. But let's not miss this. It says Israel. Israel. Jacob was named Israel. We've got this shift that now his descendants are called Israel. It's talking not about the individual. It's talking about the entirety of the clan. Henceforth, the nation is, the people are Israel, and they grew and multiplied exceedingly. We're going to see that carry through right into the book of Exodus. It's why the Egyptians start to panic. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the length of Jacob's life was 147 years. Again, Abraham lived to be 175, and Isaac lived to be 180. Now, here's something very interesting. Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. Why does 17 years matter? Why? That's how long he lived. Okay. Why call attention to it? Why does it matter? Joseph was 17 when he was sold into slavery by his brothers. At the beginning of Joseph's life, Jacob had 17 years with Joseph. At the end of his life, he has 17 years again with Joseph, balance, symmetry. And you say, that's interesting, but then we'll go here. We can look on the right now, Abraham. Abraham lived 75 years in his homeland, and then there's 25 intervening years. He has Isaac when he's 100, and he lives to be 175. He had 75 years with his son. Now, God worked things out this way for the sake of balance, but the comparison between the two, we have to look at that and say, there's a reason Moses put this in here. Jacob is blessed similarly to the way Abraham was blessed. Time with his dear son. It's there for a reason. The Holy Spirit doesn't waste any ink. It's there for a reason. These patterns of God's care, his grace, his providence, depending on your theological background and stripe, we'll use these different words, and really we use them pretty much interchangeably. But God's grace, as it was with Abraham, so also it is still with Jacob. When the time grew near that Israel must die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, "Now if I have found favor in your sight, please put your hand under my thigh and deal kindly and truly with me. Please do not bury me in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. You shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place." Now we're here into the world of the weird by our standards. Put your hand under my thigh is a euphemism. That means a nice way of saying, put your hand here near my genitals. It was about the covenant of circumcision, wasn't it? God's promise and blessing was tied to that. And to us, it's weird. This wasn't uncommon in the ancient world. It's how oftentimes oaths were taken. It was done when Abraham sent his servant, because it dealt with the continuation of the promise, right? He sent his servant back to his homeland to find a wife for Isaac. Here, Jacob, Isaac's son, does this because it's tied to the promise that's tied to circumcision. It's tied to the promise, the promised land. He's saying, don't leave me here. I need to be buried with Abraham and Isaac and the rest of my ancestors. If it's weird, it matters. And the fact, let's read the next part. And he said, I will do as you have said. Then he said, swear to me. Jacob wanted him to swear to me. And he swore to him. So Israel bowed himself on the head of the bed. He's worshiping there. But swear to me. He's doing this for a reason. And later we're going to see when Joseph goes to Pharaoh about taking his dad back to bury him, this fact, Joseph will Pharaoh will refer to it because you swore, go ahead. You swore to dad, you can't break that. And it was a big deal to leave Egypt and go up there. He was in harm's way, in effect, but he was also not there doing his job, and I don't think he got paid vacations. So, very important, this oath, it's about, again, Jacob's understanding, his right understanding of the promise and the tie to the promised land that God had promised to give to Abraham and his descendants, who would be as the stars of the heaven and the sand of the seashore. These things matter. It is significant. All right, probably more we could say about that, but we're going to stop here. Again, encourage you, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, share this with someone else. You know someone who would enjoy this content. Please share it with them. This is Matthias 76. Together, we are decoding the deception. God bless and have a great day.